You think you know your neighbors until the day one phone call changes everything. In a quiet street of Brookhaven, Illinois, where everyone's grass was trimmed the same and smiles were exchanged from a safe distance, Marcus Reed lived a life built on peace and predictability. He was the kind of man who minded his own business, worked from home, paid his bills early, and waved politely without ever joining the endless neighborhood gossip. But on one ordinary Thursday, Marcus's calm world began to unravel over something as simple as a Wi-Fi password, and what the police would later uncover would shake the entire block. It began when Marcus noticed something strange. His internet had been slowing down for weeks, video calls freezing, songs skipping, and his laptop lagging. At first, he blamed his provider, but when he dug deeper into his router settings, a name popped up under connected devices that made him pause. It wasn't random numbers or letters, it was Brookhaven 07. And that name didn't belong to any of his devices. Marcus frowned. He lived alone. He didn't share his password with anyone. So how on earth was there another connection? He decided to reset everything, to lock out whoever was quietly piggybacking on his Wi-Fi. He stepped outside to get a better signal, phone in hand, tapping quickly to change the settings. That's when Linda Parker saw him. From her kitchen window 2 houses down, she watched Marcus standing in his driveway, focused on his phone, his fingers moving fast. To her, it didn't look innocent. She had never really trusted Marcus. He didn't join the summer barbecues, didn't come to the neighborhood yard sale, and kept his curtains drawn most evenings. To Linda, that meant one thing. He was hiding something. Her heart began to race. She didn't know why, but something about him standing there, head down, typing away, it looked wrong. Her mind leapt to the worst possibility.
What if he's trying to hack something?
And just like that, fear took over reason. Before she could talk herself out of it, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Hello? I need to report something suspicious," she said quickly. "My neighbor's outside doing something strange with his phone. He's been standing there for a while, just typing and looking around. It doesn't seem right." The dispatcher asked her a few questions. What was he doing exactly? Did he have any weapons? Was he threatening anyone? Linda hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted, "but it just feels off. Please send someone." Within minutes, sirens echoed in the distance. Marcus didn't even notice at first. He had just saved his new password and leaned against the fence, satisfied that his connection was now secure. Then the flashing lights came into view and his chest tightened. 2 squad cars stopped right in front of his driveway. For a moment, Marcus thought it was just coincidence, but then one of the officers stepped out, hand resting on his holster. "Sir," the officer called out firmly, "can you tell us what you're doing out here?" Marcus blinked, confused. I'm changing my Wi-Fi password." The taller officer, Detective Hale, exchanged a quick glance with his partner, Officer Ramirez. "We got a call about suspicious activity," Hale said flatly. Marcus exhaled, trying to stay calm. "Suspicious? I'm standing in my own yard." Before Hale could respond, a sharp voice broke through the air. "He's lying." Marcus turned and saw Linda standing on her porch, her arms crossed tight across her chest. "He's always outside doing something," she said, her tone brittle. "Looking around, messing with that phone. I've seen him do it before." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "You've seen me check my router settings?" he asked. Linda scoffed. "That's what you call it?" Detective Hale turned toward her. "Ma'am, do you have any actual evidence that Mr. Reed has done something illegal?" Linda hesitated. I don't trust him," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Marcus clenched his jaw. He could feel his pulse hammering in his ears. He knew how quickly situations like this could go wrong. He took a slow breath and pulled up his phone. "You want to see what I'm doing?" "Here," he held it out. "These are my router logs." Detective Hale leaned in, scrolling through the screen. And then his expression changed, because there it was again, Brookhaven 07, connected, active, and not Marcus's device. Hale looked up. "You said this isn't yours?" "No, and it's been connected nonstop," Marcus replied. "Someone's been using my Wi-Fi." Officer Ramirez frowned. "Could just be someone stealing internet, right?" Marcus shook his head. "Maybe, but I've been noticing something else, unusual traffic. Someone's been streaming data from my network 24/7. The air grew heavier. Even Linda stopped speaking. Detective Hale's tone shifted. "Streaming what kind of data?" Marcus tapped his screen again. "It's been pulling from camera feeds. Camera feeds? Ramirez echoed. Marcus nodded slowly. My home security cameras. Someone's been logging in and watching my house. Linda's eyes widened. Watching? You? Marcus met her gaze. Maybe not just me. For the first time, Linda's confidence faltered. Her voice came out in a whisper. What do you mean? Marcus hesitated, his throat dry. I mean, someone could be watching all of us. A deep silence fell over the street. Even the hum of the police cruiser seemed to fade. Detective Hale's expression hardened. Let's take this inside, he said. We need to see exactly what's going on. Marcus led them into his home, frustration and unease swirling inside him. He hadn't done anything wrong, yet he was being treated like a suspect. Linda followed behind, part guilt, part curiosity pulling her forward. She wasn't sure what she'd find, but something told her this wasn't going to end how she expected. Inside, Marcus placed his phone on the table and mirrored his screen onto his laptop. There it was again, Brookhaven 07, still connected, still active. Officer Ramirez leaned in. Can you tell what kind of device it is? Marcus clicked through the interface. Not exactly. But look, he opened the log history. The timestamps showed constant access, days, even nights. And then, a line of code blinked at the bottom of the screen that made his stomach drop. The unknown device wasn't just viewing his cameras, it was also connected to other homes nearby. Marcus's hands trembled slightly. This isn't just about me, he said quietly. This is something bigger. Detective Hale's eyes narrowed. How big are we talking? Marcus scrolled further, revealing a list of linked IP addresses. Big enough that half the neighborhood might have been watched without knowing. Linda gasped. That can't be possible. Marcus turned to her, his voice flat. You sure about that? He clicked one of the feeds. The screen flickered, then showed a familiar living room. Linda's living room. She froze. That's my house. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. Her face drained of color as the reality sank in. Someone had been spying, not just on Marcus, but on her family. Detective Hale straightened up, his tone urgent now. All right. This isn't just a network issue anymore. We're dealing with a criminal operation. Ramirez, call for cybercrime support. Now. Detective Hale's voice sliced through the thick air. Cybercrime is on its way. No one leaves this house. Marcus leaned back, exhaling slowly. His mind raced through possibilities. Who would even have the skills to pull this off? His Wi-Fi had always been secure, his password strong. Whoever had done this wasn't some bored teenager playing around. Officer Ramirez muttered, You're telling me someone in this neighborhood is watching people through their own cameras? Marcus nodded grimly. Yes, and they're not just watching, they're recording. Linda's voice shook. Why would anyone do that? Marcus looked at her, his tone low. Because control and curiosity are powerful poisons. Once people see something they're not supposed to, they can't stop. Linda's stomach churned. For weeks, she'd been so sure Marcus was the suspicious one. Now the floor beneath her certainty was crumbling. She felt her cheeks burn with shame, but pushed the thought aside. She needed to know who was behind this. Detective Hale studied Marcus's screen. Can you trace the source of the connection? Marcus nodded, already typing. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of data and IP addresses flashed by. Come on, he whispered. Then a line of text froze him mid-keystroke. The signal wasn't being routed to some anonymous server halfway across the country. It was going to an address just a few doors down, on the same street. Linda's heart began to race. Wait, here? In Brookhaven? Marcus pointed to the screen. Exactly. Whoever did this lives right here. Detective Hale's eyes sharpened. Can you pinpoint it? Marcus kept typing, cross-referencing timestamps and connection strength. He narrowed it down, house by house, until one address matched perfectly, and when he saw it, his blood ran cold. He whispered the number aloud. 214 Cedar Lane. Linda's breath caught. That was her address. No, she said quickly, shaking her head. That's impossible. You must have made a mistake. Marcus didn't respond. He turned the laptop toward her again. The signal source matches your network extension, but it's not your router. Detective Hale stepped closer, piecing it together. Someone inside your house might be running a separate device. Linda's knees felt weak. She gripped the back of a chair for balance. Inside my house? Who could even... Then the realization hit her like a slap. Her nephew, Ethan. He had moved in with her 6 months ago after dropping out of college. quiet, always glued to his computer. When she'd ask what he was doing, he'd shrug and say, "Just coding, Aunt Linda." She felt sick. No, not Ethan. Detective Hale was already moving toward the door. "We'll need to talk to him right now." Marcus rose to follow, but Hale turned sharply. "No, you stay here. Let us handle this." Marcus clenched his fists. "He's been spying on me for weeks and I can't even see justice happen." Hale's voice softened but stayed firm. "I understand, Marcus. But trust me, you don't want to be there when we confront him." Marcus didn't argue further. He knew the look in Hale's eyes, a mixture of control and urgency. He sat back, watching from his window as the detectives and Linda crossed the street toward her house. Every step felt heavier than the last for Linda. Her mind replayed every moment she'd scolded Ethan for skipping meals, every night she'd heard him typing away past midnight. She wanted to believe he was just building some harmless project. But now dread whispered otherwise. When they reached her porch, she could barely hold her keys steady enough to unlock the door. "Ethan?" she called out, her voice trembling. "Can you come downstairs for a second?" Silence. Detective Hale nodded to Ramirez. "We'll check upstairs." They climbed the narrow staircase, their footsteps echoing in the tense stillness. The door at the end of the hallway was closed. From behind it came faint sounds, typing, the click of a mouse, and the low hum of a computer fan. Detective Hale rapped on the door hard. "Ethan Parker, this is the police. We need to speak with you." No answer. Then the faint scrape of a chair. "Ethan," Linda said softly. "Please, open the door." The knob turned slowly. The door creaked open. Ethan stood there, pale and wide-eyed, his hair messy, a hoodie hanging off his shoulders. His eyes darted between the detectives and his aunt. "What's going on?" he asked, voice strained. Hale didn't waste time. "We have evidence that someone from this address has been accessing private camera feeds across the neighborhood." "You want to explain that?" Ethan froze. His lips parted, but no words came out. Then he forced a nervous laugh. "That's ridiculous. I don't even know how to do that." Officer Ramirez gestured toward the desk. "Mind if we take a look at your laptop?" Ethan stiffened. "You don't have a warrant." Hale stepped forward, his presence heavy. "We can get one in 10 minutes. Or you can make this easier and tell us what's really been going on." The silence that followed was unbearable. Linda felt her throat tighten. "Ethan, please, tell them the truth." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his voice cracking. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, okay? It started as a joke. I just wanted to see if I could connect to someone's Wi-Fi. That's all." Hale's tone was ice. "So you admit it?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, but it got out of hand." Officer Ramirez's jaw tightened. "Out of hand how?" Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "When I realized I could see people's cameras, I got curious. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Linda's knees gave out and she dropped onto the edge of the bed. "Ethan, how could you?" Tears welled in his eyes. "I wasn't watching for fun. I wanted to prove I could do something smart. But then I couldn't stop. It was like I had control over their lives." Hale's voice was sharp now. "How many homes, Ethan?" He swallowed hard. "I don't know. Maybe 10, maybe more." Ramirez exchanged a dark glance with Hale. "That's not curiosity, son. That's invasion." Hale's voice lowered, cold and final. "Ethan Parker, you're under arrest for unauthorized access to a computer network and unlawful surveillance." Ethan didn't fight back. He just stood there, head bowed, as Ramirez cuffed his wrists. Linda sobbed quietly, whispering, "You were supposed to be better than this." Hale led Ethan out of the room. As they descended the stairs, Linda followed slowly, each step heavier than the last. When they reached the door, Marcus was standing outside, waiting. His expression was unreadable. Ethan couldn't look at him. Marcus's voice was low and steady. "All this, because I changed my password?" No one said a word. The neighborhood had never felt so silent. As Detective Hale guided Ethan toward the patrol car, the air hung thick with disbelief. Curtains shifted quietly in the surrounding houses, curious eyes watching, unaware of the truth behind the flashing red and blue lights. Linda stood frozen on the steps, her heart sinking deeper with every breath. Her nephew, the boy she had raised like her own, was being led away in handcuffs. Marcus stood by the sidewalk, his arms folded across his chest, his expression unreadable. He had spent the last hour under suspicion, accused of something he hadn't done. And now he was watching the real criminal taken away. Detective Hale paused by the car, giving Marcus a nod. "You were right," he said. "If you hadn't checked your router, we might never have caught him." Marcus didn't respond at first. His gaze lingered on Ethan, who sat slumped in the back seat of the cruiser, tears streaking down his pale face. Then he looked at Linda, her hands trembling, eyes glassy. Finally, Marcus spoke. His tone was calm, but every word cut deep. "You called the police on me because I didn't fit your picture of what normal looks like. I was minding my own business, and I became the villain in your story." Linda flinched, shame tightening her chest. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, Linda. You were protecting an idea you were afraid to question." For a long moment, no one moved. Even the officers seemed to sense the gravity of what hung in the air. Then Marcus sighed softly and turned toward his house. "I don't need an apology," he said over his shoulder. "Just make sure the next time you see someone different, you don't reach for fear before you reach for understanding." Linda's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to chase after him, to say something, anything, but the words refused to come. Instead, she stood in the fading sunlight, watching as the car drove away with Ethan and the sirens faded into the distance. The street was quiet again, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. Later that night, Marcus sat in his living room, laptop open, staring at the same Wi-Fi network screen that had started it all. The device labeled Brookhaven 07 was gone. The connection logs were empty. He should have felt relief, but instead he felt tired. Tired of being suspected. Tired of living in a world where someone could look at him and see a threat before seeing a person. He closed the laptop and leaned back, listening to the low hum of the night outside. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere else a child laughed. Life was moving on. But he couldn't shake the thought that the real virus in his neighborhood wasn't digital. It was human. Across the street, Linda sat alone on her porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The streetlights painted soft golden halos on the pavement. She watched Marcus's house in silence. For years, she had prided herself on being a good neighbor. She baked cookies for newcomers, kept her lawn perfect, and reported anything that felt off. But tonight, she saw herself clearly for the first time, and she didn't like what she saw. She thought of Ethan's words, trembling as he confessed, "I just wanted to see if I could do it." And she realized that she had done something similar. She had looked, judged, assumed because she could, because it was easy. A quiet tear rolled down her cheek. "I was wrong," she whispered into the dark. So wrong. The next morning, Marcus stepped out to get his mail. He found a small envelope on his doorstep. No name, no address. Inside was a folded note. In shaky handwriting it read, "I can't undo what I did. But I'm learning. Thank you for showing me the truth. Linda." Marcus read it twice, then tucked it into his pocket. He didn't smile, but for the first time since that day began, the heaviness in his chest eased just a little. He looked down the street at the rows of identical houses, each with their perfect lawns and drawn curtains, and thought about how fragile trust really was, how one assumption, one judgment could crack it wide open. Then he whispered softly to himself, one day at a time. The camera feeds had been shut down. The police had seized Ethan's equipment, uncovering files that showed just how deep his intrusion went. It wasn't only Brookhaven. He had accessed dozens of networks in nearby towns, some belonging to families who would never even know their privacy had been stolen. Detective Hale wrote in his report later that it wasn't just a cybercrime case, it was a study in perception. How one person's paranoia could ruin an innocent man's peace, and how fear could blind entire communities to the real danger among them. Days passed, then weeks. The neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm. Lawns trimmed, dogs walked, cars washed. But nothing was quite the same. Linda stopped gossiping at the morning coffee group. She started waving to Marcus whenever she saw him, sometimes even bringing his trash bins up the driveway after collection day. He'd nod back, briefly, politely. Forgiveness wasn't instant. But maybe, just maybe, it was possible. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the roofs and turned the sky amber, Marcus sat outside with his laptop. A new network name appeared on his screen, Brookhaven Reborn. He smiled faintly, not because he trusted it, but because it reminded him of something important. Sometimes renewal begins after everything breaks. A week passed, but Brookhaven didn't sound the same anymore. No laughter echoed from porches. No one waved quite as easily. The neighborhood had been cracked open, its quiet perfection shattered by something deeper than crime. It was fear. Fear that they hadn't seen what was right in front of them. Marcus noticed it in the way people crossed the street a little quicker now, how the same neighbors who once whispered about him now couldn't meet his eyes. But he didn't need their guilt. He needed something far more difficult. Peace. Each morning he walked to his mailbox at the same hour, same pace, same steady steps. And each time Linda's curtains fluttered as if she was fighting the urge to speak. But she didn't. Not yet. Inside her house, Linda was trapped in her own storm. The silence was unbearable. Ethan's room remained untouched, his computer desk empty, the faint glow of his old monitor like a ghost that refused to fade. She replayed every moment she could have done something different, every time she'd dismissed his long hours online, every time she'd seen Marcus outside and felt her stomach twist for reasons she couldn't name. The hardest part wasn't realizing she'd been wrong, it was realizing why. She had never hated Marcus, but she had feared him, and she didn't know where that fear came from. It wasn't about him, it was about her. About the way the world had quietly taught her who looked safe and who didn't. That realization broke something inside her. And maybe that was the beginning of change. 3 days later, there was a knock at Marcus's door. He opened it to find Linda standing there, a paper bag clutched in her hands, her eyes rimmed red from crying. "I baked something," she said softly, almost like a question. Marcus looked at the bag, then at her trembling hands. "You didn't have to." "I know," she whispered. "But I needed to." She stood there awkwardly as if her own apology was too heavy to carry. "I used to think I was a good person," she said. "And then I realized I only liked people who made me comfortable. That's not goodness, that's convenience." Marcus studied her for a long moment. He saw the regret in her eyes, the same eyes that once looked at him like a stranger she couldn't trust. Finally, he nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." They sat at his dining table, the same place where the investigation had unfolded just a week earlier. The house was still, but not in the same way. This silence wasn't fear anymore. It was understanding trying to be born. Linda looked around at the security cameras mounted in the corners. "Do you ever think about taking them down?" Marcus shook his head. "No, but I did change how I use them," she frowned. "What do you mean?" He leaned back, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Cameras used to make me feel safe. Now they just remind me that safety isn't about watching others. It's about being seen for who you are." Linda nodded slowly. "You're right. I watched people too, in my own way. Just without a screen. That line hung in the air between them like a confession neither could escape." A week later, Brookhaven began to heal in small, quiet ways. Neighbors started leaving their porch lights on a little longer. Someone planted flowers in front of Marcus's house. The neighborhood watch that once traded gossip started holding real community meetings about online safety, about bias, about understanding. Detective Hale even returned once, to give Marcus an update. Ethan had pleaded guilty. He was in a rehabilitation program for cybercrimes, working under supervision. The judge had ordered therapy alongside his sentence. "He's young," Hale said. "He's got a chance to change if he wants it." Marcus nodded. "We all do." That night, Linda sat in her living room staring at the soft glow of a candle flickering beside Ethan's empty computer chair. For the first time, she wasn't angry, she was grateful. Grateful that the truth had come out before someone got hurt. Grateful that her assumptions had been shattered before they became irreversible. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Marcus. "If you ever want to teach me about Wi-Fi security, I'll bring the coffee." A moment later, her phone buzzed with his reply, "Deal. But only if you promise not to call 911 this time." For the first time in weeks, Linda laughed, a small, honest laugh that cracked the weight inside her chest. Months later, Brookhaven looked almost the same, but the people inside it weren't. Marcus had started a small local initiative, helping residents secure their home networks and understand online privacy. He named it the Brookhaven Project, a quiet tribute to the chaos that had started everything. People showed up, curious, humbled, ready to listen. Linda was the first volunteer. When she stood beside Marcus during the first workshop, she didn't see a man she once feared. She saw the person who had taught her what fear cost her and what empathy could rebuild. As the meeting ended that night, Marcus looked out over the small crowd, his voice steady. "Technology connects us," he said, "but it also exposes us to danger, to judgment, to misunderstanding. The internet isn't what makes us unsafe. Our assumptions do. So before you decide who someone is, remember this. Sometimes the person you think is the threat is the one who's trying to protect you." The crowd fell silent, and then softly they began to clap. The story of Marcus Reed and Linda Parker became a quiet legend in Brookhaven. Not because of the crime, not because of the drama, but because it forced an entire community to see themselves differently. Fear had built walls, but truth had built bridges. And sometimes that's all a neighborhood needs, a moment of reckoning to remember that people aren't problems to solve. They're stories waiting to be understood. So if you ever find yourself judging someone based on what you think you see, pause. The truth might be standing right in front of you, just waiting for you to look deeper. 6 months later, the summer sun returned to Brookhaven. From the outside, the neighborhood looked perfect again. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, children riding bikes down the same quiet streets where chaos had once erupted. But underneath that calm, something had shifted forever. Marcus stood on his porch one morning, coffee in hand, watching the world wake up. Across the street, Linda was planting a small tree in her yard, a young oak, its leaves trembling in the wind. She caught his eye, smiled faintly, and nodded. He nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something rarer. Understanding. That single nod said more than any words ever could. Later that week, Marcus received a letter from the county courthouse. It was about Ethan's sentencing hearing, open to the public. For a moment, Marcus almost threw it away. He didn't want to relive that day, those accusations, the shame that wasn't his to carry. But something inside him whispered, "Go." He arrived quietly, slipping into the back row of the courtroom. Linda sat near the front, her hands twisted together like she was praying for strength she didn't have. Ethan was led in wearing a simple gray jumpsuit, thinner than before, his eyes hollow but not defiant. The judge spoke about responsibility, privacy, and consequences, but Marcus barely heard the words. His eyes stayed fixed on Ethan, the young man who had turned curiosity into violation. When the judge asked if anyone wished to speak on behalf of the victims, the room fell silent. Then Linda rose, trembling but firm. "Your Honor," she said softly, "the man Ethan hurt the most isn't me. It's the neighbor I wrongly accused." She turned and looked directly at Marcus. "He showed me what real strength looks like, when someone can stand under the weight of suspicion and still choose grace." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge paused. Linda continued, her voice breaking. "I believed something terrible about him because I was too scared to believe otherwise. And that fear almost destroyed an innocent life. But Ethan didn't learn that behavior from nowhere. He learned it from a world that watches before it understands. From people like me." Her words hung in the air, sharp and raw. When she sat down, Marcus slowly stood. "I don't have much to add," he said quietly. "But if you want to talk about justice, I think it should be more than punishment. It should be truth." He looked at Ethan. "You didn't just invade people's privacy. You stole their peace. But here's the thing about peace, it doesn't die easy. It rebuilds itself." He paused. "I hope one day you learn that and give it back." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he nodded. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The courtroom exhaled as if everyone had been holding their breath for months. After the hearing, Linda approached Marcus outside. The air was warm and quiet, the courthouse steps bathed in afternoon light. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You didn't have to say that in there." Marcus gave a tired smile. "I didn't say it for him. I said it for us," she frowned. "Us? For this neighborhood. For people like us who forget that fear spreads faster than truth." Linda blinked back tears. "You think we can fix that?" Marcus looked up at the sky, where sunlight spilled through the branches. "Maybe not all at once," he said. "But one neighbor at a time, that's a start." That evening, Brookhaven gathered for the first real neighborhood meeting since the incident. Not to gossip, Not to blame, but to listen. Marcus stood in front of the small crowd, no script in his hands, just honesty. Every one of us here has been watched, he began. By cameras, by judgment, by the stories people tell about us before they know us. The question is, when do we start watching ourselves? People shifted, uneasy but thoughtful. Safety, Marcus said, isn't about fences or passwords. It's about empathy, about choosing to see the best before assuming the worst. We can rebuild that together. For a long time, no one spoke. Then, one by one, heads began to nod. A few people clapped softly. Linda stood first, tears in her eyes, and the rest followed. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was a standing promise. Weeks turned into months. Brookhaven began to change, not in big, flashy ways, but in small, honest ones. People talked more, listened more, helped each other with small things. Forgotten mail, yard work, rides to the grocery store. Trust was growing again, fragile but real. Marcus and Linda became unlikely friends. They started hosting weekend workshops on digital safety and community awareness. The same street that once called 911 over fear was now teaching others how to stay safe without turning against one another. Even Ethan, from his rehabilitation center, began sending letters filled with apology, with progress, with learning. Marcus read every one of them. Not to forget, but to forgive. One cool autumn evening, as the leaves turned copper and gold, Marcus stood outside his house watching the sunset. Linda joined him, handing him a cup of tea. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked. Marcus chuckled softly. "Not in a million years." They stood in comfortable silence, the wind carrying the scent of pine and smoke. "You know," Linda said after a while, "I used to think safety meant locking the door. Now I think it means opening it to the right people." Marcus smiled faintly. "Exactly." They both looked up as a group of kids raced down the street laughing, chasing one another with the pure joy only childhood understands. The sound filled the neighborhood again, the kind of sound that meant healing was real. Marcus turned to Linda, his voice low but strong. "Maybe that's what this was all for," he said. "Not just to expose what was broken, but to remind us what was still worth saving." Linda nodded. "And what's that?" He looked at the sky, the neighborhood, the people who had once doubted him, and smiled. "Faith," he said simply, "in each other." The camera feeds were gone. The passwords were changed. But what stayed, the lesson, the connection, the courage to see each other without fear, was stronger than anything technology could take away. And in that quiet, rebuilt corner of Brookhaven, trust found its way home again.